Alright, hey guys. I thought I'd make another tutorial just explaining some of the XML files in the missions folder. So to get to that, so we've got the DayZ server here. This will be the same as the Win SCP, just not actually on the server. So if I was going to go on the server to get it, go on there, and it'll be exactly the same as this. So you go in MP missions and then get to it like that. But to save doing it on the server, I'm just going to do it in this folder. So MP missions, and then in here. So these are all your XML files. We've got some in these two folders as well. To start with, I'm going to do the most popular XML file, which is this one. As you can see, it's quite large compared to the other ones. So types.xml. So this at the top is basically just allows the XML file to be recognized. You don't need to worry about that. This is a declaration of types, and it's also got its partner at the bottom, which ends the file. It starts with a /. And if you think of that as one group, so that is one group, all of this is one group, and that declares the types file. Inside that you've got several other little groups. So you've got this type here, which is declared, and the type is an ACOG optic. So you can imagine what that will be in game. That would be the ACOG scope. And all of this information here is part of the same little group. And as you can see, it's got a / with a type there to end the group. And this is another group, and another group, etc., etc. Now, inside these little type groups is little bits of information. I tried to explain them as best as I can. Now you have the nominal value. So inside here you've got the number 15. This basically means that when the server starts up, and if it's got no loot spawned in yet, it will spawn in 15 ACOG optic scopes randomly around the areas it's allowed to spawn. And they will stay there if they're untouched by players for that many seconds. For that many seconds. And then they'll despawn. Now, if some of these are picked up or by players, then that count will go down. So picked up by one player, it'll go down to 14, by another down to 13, etc., etc. And when it gets to the minimum value of 8, that'll start a timer, a restock timer. So it'll then count that many seconds, and it will respawn enough to take it back up to the nominal value. So let me say that again. It'll spawn in 15 to start with, and they'll stay there for that amount of time, which is called its lifetime. And then once it gets down to 8, it'll begin the timer, which is the restock timer. And once that's up, it'll spawn in enough to take it back up to the nominal value of 15. Now you don't really need to worry too much about these for now. I'll explain that on something else in a bit. So the flags here, what we have, these are where the loot is counted in the server. So in cargo is in clothing. I believe it's just in clothing and similar items like that. In hoarder is in base type items, so say barrels and tents and things like that. As you can see, these are zeros, they haven't been counted. So that won't affect the nominal. But count in map. So this is anything that's on the floor in the map. That is counted. Count in player, as you can imagine, it's a player that's active in the server, if it'll count inside there. Crafted, so whether someone's crafted it, doesn't count. And deloot. Now what deloot means is if it's in a heli crash or something like that, is whether it's counted into a heli crash or not. And there are all the different flags. So for this particular item, the ACOG, it's only counted in the map. And then once, so that means that the nominal will only be affected by the ones actually on the floor in the map. category is the category of item it is. So you can get different categories like weapons and clothing and things like that, and this counts as the weapons category because it's to do with a rifle, an optic for a rifle, and obviously it's military. So that's two different sort of categories, but this is what it's used for. Usage is a military usage. Now if we scroll down to another random item, what have we got here? Let's go and use baked beans. That's a good one. Normal of 20, blah blah blah. I told you all about this. Yep. So here we have, it's a food category, and it'll spawn on shelves in shops and things. It'll spawn in towns and villages. These are all different categories that have spawn points around the map, and being labelled here means that they will spawn in these particular places. And in the map of Chernarus there are 4 tiers of loot, and the different tiers are the areas of the maps which these will spawn. Tier 1 is the area that's closest to the coast. Tier 2 is inland, just a little bit more. And Tier 3 kind of more military type areas, and Tier 4 is the highest military type area. So these baked beans will spawn in all of these areas. Okay, let's go to something like a water bottle, for instance. Here we go. Now, one value that we haven't discussed yet is quant min and quant max. Now, what I believe this does is, if you have an item that has liquid in the container or some sort of variable when it spawns, so say like a bag of rice for instance, you have a certain percentage. The minimum percentage you can spawn with is 20, and the maximum percentage you can spawn with is 70. So you'll never find a full water bottle if it's just been spawned in by the server. If you find a full water bottle, it means a player's touched it. In this particular case, obviously different servers, players, the server admins can edit these particular values. So it's not the same in every server, just the vanilla ones. These are just vanilla server files I've got here. Okay, and that pretty much covers most of the different types you'll have here. I mean, you've got zombies here as well, and this just yeah. So most mods you download, you'll have to put types into here. You have to upload the types into here. Okay, next file. Globals. These are most of the values that you're going to be able to change that affects the server globally. So the maximum amount of animals in the server, for instance. Most of these are pretty explanatory, self-explanatory. So how long it takes to clean up a dead animal, so basically delete a dead animal, is that many seconds. Most of these are in seconds. Same for all of these. They're how long to clean up infected and players. So say for instance you wanted to have players last a lot longer after they've died, so that you can have a better chance to grab the loot. You could change that to a higher number. That's what that would do. Yeah, more self-explanatory stuff like how long ruined stuff takes to despawn. How long food takes to decay. Oh no, food decay, sorry. With a value of 1 or 0, this is a Boolean value. And so if it's at 1, this means food will decay. If you change it to 0, this means your food won't decay. So you'll have fresh food forever on your server. One that is kind of important is zombie max count. Now this affects server performance quite a lot. So you can add in a lot more zombies to your server just by upping that number. But I'd up it, join your server, and just make sure that the performance is okay. You can lose quite a few FPS by having too many zombies. but it can be quite fun. Yeah, and then that's all you really need to know in here. I mean, these ones here, time login, time log out. This is the timer when you join a server. There'll be a 15-second countdown. This is the time for log out, although I believe this one currently doesn't work. Time penalty, this is when you're server hopping. It'll give you an extra 20 seconds on top of this value. Okay, next file. Events. Now, events, funnily enough, are events in the game. So, ambient hen. Funny names. This will spawn in a hen. It'll spawn 3 of these particular events in. It doesn't mean it'll spawn 3 hens. It'll mean it'll spawn 3 events of these hens in. Now, each of these events will potentially spawn 2 of that type, 4 of that type, 4 of that type, 4 of that type. Or it could spawn just 1. So that's a minimum of 1 of these, and a maximum of 2, minimum of 1, maximum of 4. And these are the types of hen. I believe that's the hen's Latin name. So yes, and it'll have 3 of these events, and it'll be in over a certain radius, and they'll spawn in. That's the lifetime of how long they'll be alive for. That's the restock value. Now these, as you can see, are a lot smaller. I believe these are in minutes compared to seconds from the types file. 40 is a safe radius. That means that it won't spawn if there's a player within 40 meters of it. These aren't affected by it at the moment. I mean, that's about it really. You don't really need to know too much more about the events. Same with the bears there, look. And the minimum of the maximum here. Minimum of 0 in the world, obviously, because you can have 0 hens, and maximum you have 50 in at one time. Let's move down a bit to something else. Okay, here we have infected. This works exactly the same as the other bit. So the amount of infected in the city. You've also got the army one here as well. So these are the different types of army zombie. Got the autumn one, etc., etc. Let's scroll down a bit more. Okay, so here we have vehicles. Maximum of 8 will spawn in. Minimum of 5. Could be some more. And these are the different types. So you'll have at least 3 of them, 3 of them, 3 of them, and potentially 5 each. You see? Okay, there's some of the basic ones. Now if we go back and go into the next folder. Now all these are locations of the territories of particular creatures. You've got all the different animals here, and then you've also got the zombies at the bottom here. Let's go in the zombies one. Now, event name, I believe the event name of the zombies that you want to spawn in. So this one is infected village. And you've also got infected army, so these are the army zombies. And this is the minimum number of dynamic zombie events that can spawn here, and the maximum number of dynamic zombie events. Now bear in mind again that these aren't just the zombies, these are the amount of events that can spawn in at this particular area. So we've got the X coordinate and the Z coordinate. Now you may be thinking, where's the Y coordinate? So all it'll do is it'll plonk it on top of the map basically. So whatever height the terrain is at, that's where they will go. Now the R here is the radius, and this is how big of an area that they'll spawn over. So that'll be a circumference of 90. So 90 meters away from a particular point they will spawn at. So say if you're on the airfield and you are in the middle of this point, zombies would spawn all around you for 90 meters. Yeah, and that is the same for all of these. As you can see, there are a lot of spawn points. But if you wanted to have your own custom one where zombies would spawn in, this would be where you would add in the coordinates for it. Okay, on to the next one. And these are all the same. These all have, as you can see, areas where they can spawn in. Okay, so on to some of these. Event spawns. Event spawns, very similar to the event spawns are very similar to the zombie territories, except they just cover everything else. So they're not the animal territories, they cover all the other events that happen in the game. So for instance, this will spawn in the trucks, the newly added trucks, and it will spawn at that location and that location. Yeah, and I mean, that's the rotation, which way it'll face. So it'll spawn here, and it'll be facing that way. And that's the same for every other thing in here. So you've got loads of different stuff. Static police cars, so you know when the police car events spawn in, you get your police loot. That'll be from that as well. Okay, on to the next one. Player spawn points. You could probably guess what that is. These are the potential areas where a player can spawn. And there's loads of them. So basically you can add in some spawn points for where you'd like your player to spawn. Simple as that already. Okay, so we have random presets. Now in this random presets, there's various different names of cargo and the chance that they will spawn. So for instance, if this particular bit here was attached to a zombie, and I'll show you how to do that in a second in the spawnable types, it'll have a 15 chance of spawning, sorry, a 0.15 chance of spawning, which I believe is 15% actually in this, because it counts up to 1. And in that you can either have a can of tuna, can of sardines, or an apple. So for instance, you could make your own one. You could copy that, paste that in there, change this to new zombie loot, and you'd have that spawning for anything that you assign that to. So if we now go into spawnable types, we can find our zombies. So here we go, look. These have some of the things that we looked at in the last one. So random presets, we put new zombie loot. So if we go in here, we could add new zombie loot there. It's a cargo preset, and then when you kill a zombie, there'll be a certain chance that it'll spawn on the zombie. Okay, let's look at the rest of this. So what you'll be using this for mostly, I believe, will be when you add a mod and they'll want something to spawn in as a group. So say for instance you have a car. Now if you just spawn a car in without it being in this, so say you just spawn the type in, it will spawn it in, but it'll spawn it in without anything at all. So it'll just be the chassis of the car. It won't have any wheels, won't have any of the double wheels or the batteries or anything like that. It'll just spawn in. What this does is it makes that, which is the type in the types file, spawn in with chance of spawning a 60% chance of spawning that wheel and that wheel, etc, etc. 40% chance of that wheel, 40% chance of that wheel. And that carries them down here, and you've got the truck batteries and the headlights and the hood and the doors as well. Yeah, so there's a chance that it'll spawn with this stuff, and then that's the only way you can do that is with a spawnable types file. Here we go, weapons. So here we have the B95, and there is a small chance, attachments, there's an 18% chance it's going to spawn with a hunting optic, which is the hunting scope. And then that, yeah, and that there is one weapon. That is another weapon. And that's the same for all of them. So you've got an SVD here. So say, for instance, you wanted your SVD to always spawn with everything attached. You'd make these chances as 1.00, and then that would always spawn with an SVD mag. And this one, and this one, and this one is 1.0, and they'd also spawn with well, actually, in this case, you'd have to pick between one of these because they're both the same optic slots. But they would spawn with a Kashtan or a PSO 111. Yeah, so that, these zombies actually, let me just explain this one as well. With the zombies, so these are one group of zombies, one particular type of zombie. And it'll have a chance when you kill it to drop the loot that is in the food village in random presets, or the tools village, so it'll drop some food or some tools maybe. And if it's wearing anything, that will be what this is. So attachments are things that it'll be wearing. So when you kill it in the, say for the vest slot or something like that, or the glasses, it'll have some glasses on, or hats, or it'll be having a backpack or bags. Yep, that's spawnable types really. That's all you need to know about that. And I think that's roughly about it. These are all just areas where random stuff spawns. So if we look at it quickly, we've got pear tree. So that'll be where the pear trees are and where they'll drop the pears and things like that. And there's absolutely loads of them. They're really big files. If you can see here, they're like 4.5 megabytes, which is pretty big for an XML file. They've got loads and loads and loads of bits of information in. If we scroll to the bottom, they've got 50,000 lines on them. So that's a lot of information, and they're mostly just for the vanilla stuff. Yeah, and it's pretty similar for all of these, to be fair. I wouldn't worry too much about these. And that's all the simple ones explained. I'll try and shorten the video a bit. If you need any help or want any extra information, you can catch me on the Septic Falcon Discord. I'll put a link in the description.